Welcome, weary travellers, to the Cosy Green Dragon, a hobbit's pub, nestled deep in the rolling hills of the Shire. Here, where the lantern light dances and the aroma of ale fills the air, tales of wonder and adventure are always on tap. Step inside, grab your favourite drink, and gather round the hearth. Tonight, we journey through ancient legends, whisper the forgotten lore of mythical beasts, and lose ourselves in the tales of heroes and hobbits alike. From the roaring flights of dragons to the quiet rustlings of enchanted woods, this is your sanctuary for relaxation, imagination, and adventure. But that's not all. There's always room for another adventurer. So if you're ready to escape the ordinary and uncover the magic of storytelling, hit subscribe and join our growing fellowship. Every tale is a new journey waiting just for you. Welcome, friends, to your little corner of Middle-earth. Let's make every moment here unforgettable. Welcome, wanderers of Middle-earth, to a tale shrouded in mystery, adventure, and the whispers of ancient trees. Today, we dive into the epic story of the Ents, the mighty guardians of the forests, whose timeless journey through Middle-earth shaped the very fate of the land. But there's a twist. While we know the Ents well, their story is incomplete without the enigmatic Entwives. What happened to them? Were they lost forever, or could they still be waiting for their return? Join me as we uncover the rise, the fall, and the enduring legacy of the Ents, from their sacred duty to protect the forests to the heart-wrenching mystery of the missing Entwives. This is a story that will leave you wondering about the forces that shape the natural world. So sit back, relax, and let the ancient world of the Ents come alive. The journey begins now. Part 1. The Awakening of the Ents. In the first light of Ardor, the world was a place of boundless beauty and potential. Vast oceans stretched to uncharted horizons, and towering mountains rose to brush the skies. But it was the forests, verdant and untouched, that were the true heart of the world. Their canopies swayed to the melody of the Ainur, an echo of the great music that had given shape to existence. Among the Vala, Yavanna Kementari walked with the greatest love for these green realms. She was the giver of fruits, the one who sang life into the grasses and trees. To her, each forest was a symphony of its own, the deep hum of ancient roots, the rustle of leaves in the wind, and the steady pulse of growing things. Yet, even amid this beauty, a shadow troubled her heart. It was during a gathering in Valinor, the Blessed Realm, that Yavanna voiced her concern. Standing tall among her peers, her green robes shimmering like the forests at dawn, she spoke to Manwe, the king of the Vala. "My lord," she began, her voice soft yet resolute, "the forests I have shaped are fragile. In their splendour lies vulnerability. When the children of Ilúvatar awaken, they will need wood for their homes, fire for their warmth, but I fear that in their haste, they will not see the life within the trees. They will take, and they will not give back." Manwe looked upon her with understanding, for he too saw beyond the veil of time. "The children will bring both creation and destruction," he said. "But this is the way of the world. What would you have us do, sister?" "I ask for guardians," Yavanna replied. "Beings who can protect the forests, who will speak for the trees when none else will." There was silence in the gathering, save for the gentle murmur of the wind that always accompanied Manwe. Then Aule the Maker, Yavanna's husband, stepped forward. His hands were calloused from countless ages of crafting, yet they were capable of immense tenderness. "I will shape them," he said, his voice like the rumble of a distant forge. "From the strength of the earth I will craft beings of might, but it is your song, Yavanna, that must bring them life." Thus the Ents were conceived. Auli worked tirelessly, sculpting their forms from stone and wood. Each Ent was unique, reflecting the essence of the trees they would one day protect. There was birch, tall and lithe, with silver bark that gleamed like moonlight. Oak was broad and sturdy, his knotted limbs a testament to his ancient wisdom, and pine, whose towering height and evergreen nature symbolized resilience. When the forms were complete, Yavanna approached. She sang, her voice weaving a melody that was both tender and powerful. It was a song of growth, of roots burrowing deep into the earth and branches reaching for the heavens. As her song filled the air, the Ents began to stir. Their eyes opened, glowing with the light of the two trees of Valinor, and they rose to their full height, towering over even the tallest elves. The first to speak was Treebeard, later known as Fangorn. His voice was deep and slow, like the groaning of ancient timbers. "Who are we?" he asked, his gaze fixed on Yavanna. "You are the Ents," she replied, smiling. "Shepherds of the forest, protectors of the trees." Treebeard nodded slowly, as if the weight of the task was settling upon him. "We will guard them," he said, "for they are beautiful, and beauty must endure." The first walk of the Ents. With their purpose clear, the Ents began their first walk through the forests of Middle-earth. They marvelled at the variety of life around them, the towering pines of the north, the flowering birches of the east, and the dense jungles that thrived in the south. Each tree had a voice, and the Ents took the time to listen. In those early days, the Ents moved freely, unbound by the constraints of time. They learned the language of the trees, a slow and ancient tongue that required patience to master. Treebeard, always curious, spent decades speaking with the eldest trees, gleaning their wisdom. Others, like birch and willow, delighted in the younger groves, teaching saplings to grow tall and strong. The trees, in turn, adored the Ents. They swayed their branches in greeting and whispered their secrets through rustling leaves. To the Ents, each forest became a home, and each tree a friend. The coming of the Entwives. Though the Ents were content, Yavanna foresaw a need for balance. The forests would not thrive on protection alone. They required nurture, care, and the guiding hand of cultivation. And so, she created the Entwives. Unlike the Ents, who revelled in the wild and untamed, the Entwives were drawn to order. They loved the plains and valleys, where they could shape the land into gardens and orchards. While the Ents delighted in the chaos of nature, the Entwives found joy in its transformation. Fimbrethil, later known as Wandlim, was among the first of the Entwives. She was slender and graceful, with eyes that gleamed like sunlight on a meadow. When she met Treebeard, their connection was immediate, though their spirits were vastly different. "You love the wild places," Fimbrethil once said to Treebeard as they stood on the edge of a forest. "But I see beauty in the open lands. The plains call to me, and I must answer." Treebeard sighed, his deep voice tinged with sadness. "I understand, my love, but promise me that you will not stray too far." For many ages, the Ents and Entwives lived in harmony, though their paths often diverged. The Entwives taught men and elves the art of cultivation, sharing their knowledge of crops and orchards. The Ents, meanwhile, remained guardians of the forests, ensuring that the wild places of the world endured. Part 2. The Sundering. The days of harmony between the Ents and the Entwives stretched for ages, but as with all things in Middle-earth, change came quietly at first, and then all at once. The Entwives, with their love of shaping the land, grew increasingly drawn to the fertile plains and open fields. The wild, untamed forests that the Ents cherished held less appeal for them. This difference, born of the very nature Yavanna had imbued in them, began to pull the two peoples apart. A season of distance. At first the separation was subtle. The Entwives would wander farther afield, seeking lands where they could cultivate their gardens. They found fertile soils east of the great river Anduin, a vast stretch of rolling hills and meadows where they planted orchards of golden fruit trees and fields of flowers that stretched to the horizon. Fimbrithil often spoke to Treebeard of these places, her voice alight with excitement. "The land is so rich, my love," she said, her slender fingers tracing patterns in the bark of a young sapling. "The earth is soft and welcoming. I planted rows of apple trees, and already their blossoms promise fruit. You should see it." Treebeard listened, his heart heavy with both pride and unease. "And what of the forests?" he asked. "Do you not miss their song?" Fimbrithil smiled softly, though her eyes betrayed a hint of sadness. "I do," she admitted, "but the wildwoods do not need me as the plains do. I bring life to the places where none grows." For a time, the Ents visited the Entwives in their gardens. Treebeard himself often crossed the Anduin to be with Fimbrithil. He marvelled at the ordered beauty she had created. Rows of fruit trees heavy with golden apples, vines curling elegantly over trellises, and fields of flowers that seemed to dance in the breeze. Yet, as much as he admired her work, Treebeard felt a pang of longing for the untamed wilds. He missed the tangled roots of the ancient forests, the shade of the towering oaks, and the freedom of the unbroken canopy. One evening, as the sun set over the plains, casting a golden glow over Fimbrithil's gardens, Treebeard spoke hesitantly. "Your work is beautiful, my love," he said, "but I fear I do not belong here. The forests call to me." Fimbrithil's smile was bittersweet. "And the gardens call to me," she replied. "But we are both where we are meant to be. The Great Divide." As the years passed, the visits grew less frequent. The Entwives became more rooted in their gardens, and the Ents withdrew deeper into the forests. Though there was no anger between them, an unspoken sorrow lingered in their hearts. They knew that the paths they had chosen were pulling them in opposite directions. The sundering reached its peak when Fimbrithil and the other Entwives made a decision that would shape the fate of their kind forever. They resolved to settle permanently in the lands east of the Anduin, leaving the forests behind. It was a decision born of necessity, for their gardens required constant care, and the distance to the forests had grown too great. Treebeard was among the last to see the Entwives before they departed. He stood on the western bank of the Anduin as Fimbrithil prepared to cross. The river's waters shimmered in the twilight, and the air was heavy with the weight of their parting. "Will you not stay?" Treebeard asked, his deep voice tinged with both hope and resignation. Fimbrithil paused, her hands resting on the trunk of a young sapling she had nurtured. "I cannot," she said softly. "The gardens need me, but I will think of you, always." "And I of you," Treebeard replied. "Sing to the trees in your gardens, Fimbrithil. Perhaps they will carry your song to me on the wind." With that, Fimbrithil stepped onto the ferry, her figure silhouetted against the fading light. Treebeard watched as she crossed the river, the distance between them growing until she was no more than a shadow on the horizon, the Entwives' new home. The Entwives thrived in their new lands. They cultivated vast orchards, vineyards and fields, teaching men and elves the art of farming and gardening. These lands became a place of unparalleled beauty, a testament to the Entwives' skill and dedication. The golden apples of their orchards were said to bring joy to all who tasted them, and the flowers of their meadows inspired songs that were sung across Middle-earth. The men of the region revered the Entwives as divine beings, calling them shepherds of the land. They built shrines in their honour and followed their teachings, planting crops and tending orchards in the Entwives' image. Yet, even in their success, the Entwives could not forget the forests they had left behind. Fimbrathil often gazed westward, her heart aching with longing for Treebeard. She sang songs of the wildwoods, her voice carrying over the plains. O forest deep, where my heart once dwelled, sing to me of the days of old, she would sing. And though the winds carried her song far, no reply came. The gathering storm. For many ages the Entwives lived in peace, their gardens flourishing. But the shadow of Sauron began to spread, and the lands east of the Anduin were not spared. The Dark Lord's armies marched across Middle-earth, leaving destruction in their wake. The Entwives, unyielding in their love for the land, stood firm against the tide of darkness. They taught the men of the region to resist, and together they fought to protect the gardens. But Sauron's forces were relentless. The orchards were burned, the fields trampled, and the Entwives were scattered. Treebeard and the Ents, hearing of the devastation, crossed the Anduin in search of their lost companions. They walked the scorched lands, their heavy footsteps echoing in the silence. Everywhere they looked, they saw only destruction, blackened stumps where orchards had once stood, and barren fields where flowers had once bloomed. Treebeard called out to Fimbrathil, his voice carrying across the desolate plains. Fimbrathil, Wandlim, my love, where are you? But there was no reply. The Entwives were gone, their fate a mystery. The aftermath. The loss of the Entwives was a wound that never healed. The Ents returned to their forests, their hearts heavy with sorrow. They sang songs of lamentation, their deep voices resonating with grief. Where have they gone, the light of our lives, O golden fields, where beauty thrived? The west wind whispers, but gives no sign. O Entwives, where now do you lie? For centuries the Ents searched, wandering the wilds of Middle-earth in the hope of finding their lost companions, but the Entwives remained hidden, or perhaps lost forever. Part 3. The Ents' Lament and the Passing of Ages. The Ents, once vibrant and filled with purpose, were forever changed by the loss of the Entwives. For centuries, the forests of Middle-earth were heavy with their mourning. Their voices, deep and resonant, filled the woods with songs of sorrow that echoed through the hills and valleys. These laments, long and complex, were both a tribute to the Entwives and a reflection of the Ents' enduring pain. The Lament of Treebeard. Treebeard, the oldest and most wise of the Ents, bore the heaviest grief. He often wandered alone through the ancient forests, his slow, deliberate steps guided by memories of Fimbrathil. He would pause beneath the shade of great oaks and whisper her name, as though the wind might carry his words to her. One of Treebeard's most profound laments was sung beneath the moonlight, his deep voice mingling with the rustling leaves. Long have I walked, through shadow and sun, seeking the light of the one who is gone. O Fimbrathil, Wandlim, fairest of all, your song is the wind, I answer your call. Where have you wandered, O tender vine? The hills have grown silent, no answer is mine. Yet still I shall seek, though ages may fade, for the song of your heart, in forest or glade. These words, though simple in their sorrow, were imbued with an ancient and timeless yearning. They spoke of love lost but not forgotten, and of a hope that burned faintly, even as centuries passed. The changing forests. As the ages turned, the forests themselves began to change. Many of the ancient woods dwindled, their trees felled by men and dwarves who sought wood for their homes and fires. The Ents, though mighty, could not protect all the forests of Middle-earth. They were spread too thin, and their numbers dwindled, as no new Entings were born. Treebeard often spoke of this decline with a mix of sadness and resignation. "We have lost much," he would say to the younger Ents, his voice heavy with the weight of ages. "The world grows smaller, and the trees are fewer, yet we must endure, for the forests that remain still need us." Despite their sorrow, the Ents remained steadfast in their duty. They tended to the remaining forests with care, singing to the trees and nurturing them. In the depths of Fangorn Forest, where the shadows were deepest, the Ents created a sanctuary. Here, the oldest trees stood tall and unyielding, their roots entwined in a great network that spoke of unity and resilience, encounters with the free peoples. Though the Ents were reclusive, they were not entirely cut off from the rest of Middle-earth. Elves, who shared a deep connection with nature, often visited the forests and spoke with the Ents. The elves sang songs of the Entwives, weaving their memory into the tapestry of Middle-earth's lore. Some claimed to have seen the Entwives in distant lands, their slender forms tending to hidden gardens, but these tales were fleeting and unconfirmed. Men, too, had their stories. Farmers in the east spoke of strange beings who had once taught their ancestors the secrets of the land. They described figures with skin like bark and hair like autumn leaves, who had vanished long ago. These tales, passed down through generations, kept the memory of the Entwives alive, even as the Ents themselves began to lose hope of finding them. The Council of the Ents. As the shadow of Sauron grew, the Ents held a great council in Fangorn Forest, a rare gathering of all the remaining shepherds of the trees. Treebeard, as the eldest, presided over the meeting. The Ents spoke in slow, deliberate tones, their deep voices resonating through the forest. "The world darkens," Treebeard said. "The forests grow thin, and the trees speak of fire and axes. Yet we are few, and our strength wanes. What are we to do?" Oaklim, a younger Ent with a voice like the groaning of old timber, replied, "We cannot abandon the trees, but the world beyond the forest grows restless. Perhaps the Entwives are still out there, somewhere. Perhaps they would aid us if we found them." This suggestion sparked a rare flicker of hope among the Ents. For the first time in centuries, they spoke of the Entwives with a sense of purpose. They debated where to search, recalling the plains and gardens east of the Anduin. But even as they planned, doubt lingered in their hearts. The lands had changed, and the shadow of Sauron had consumed much of the east. If the Entwives still lived, they were well hidden. The passing of ages. As the Third Age progressed, the Ents grew increasingly isolated. The forests of Middle-earth continued to dwindle, and the Ents became a rare and mysterious presence. Travellers whispered of strange ancient beings that watched from the shadows of Fangorn, their eyes glowing like embers in the dark. Some dismissed these tales as legends, while others feared the wrath of the Ents, calling them tree giants and shepherds of wrath. Despite their dwindling numbers and the encroachment of men and orcs, the Ents endured. They clung to their memories, their songs, and their duty to the trees. Yet their search for the Entwives remained unfulfilled. Treebeard often wandered the edges of Fangorn, his gaze fixed on the distant horizon. "Perhaps they are still out there," he would say to himself. "Perhaps they wait, as we wait." A meeting with hope. In the waning years of the Third Age, a glimmer of hope came to the Ents in the form of unexpected visitors. When Merry and Pippin, two hobbits from the Shire, stumbled into Fangorn Forest, they were astonished to meet Treebeard. The Ent, curious and cautious, questioned them about the world beyond the forest. Through their conversations, Treebeard learned of the growing threat of Saruman and the devastation wrought upon the forests of Isengard. But it was Pippin's words about the green hills and gardens of the Shire that stirred something deep within Treebeard. "Green hills, you say?" Treebeard murmured. "With fields of flowers and orchards of fruit? It sounds much like the gardens of the Entwives." Though he knew the Shire was unlikely to hold the answers he sought, Treebeard found comfort in the hobbits' tales. It was a reminder that beauty and harmony still existed in the world, even as darkness loomed. Conclusion of Part 3. The Ent's story, woven with loss, endurance, and fleeting hope, remains one of the most poignant tales of Middle-earth. As Treebeard often said, "We are not hasty," and so the Ents waited, their deep songs resonating through the forests, a testament to their resilience and their undying love for the Entwives. Part 4. The War of the Ring and the Legacy of the Ents. As the Third Age neared its fiery climax, the Ents of Middle-earth faced a choice that would define their legacy. The War of the Ring brought conflict to every corner of the land, and even the secluded Ents could no longer remain on the sidelines. The forests they had sworn to protect were under siege, and the shadow of Saruman loomed over their ancient sanctuary of Fangorn Forest. Saruman's betrayal. For centuries, Saruman the White had resided in Isengard, a fortress nestled at the southern edge of Fangorn. To the Ents, he had been a neutral presence, a Maya of great knowledge who, at least outwardly, claimed allegiance to the free peoples of Middle-earth. But Saruman's lust for power had corrupted him, and he began to cut down the trees of Fangorn to fuel the fires of war. Treebeard, the oldest and wisest of the Ents, was the first to recognize the extent of Saruman's betrayal. As he walked through the forest, he found clearings where mighty trees had been felled and replaced by pits of blackened earth. The air was thick with the acrid stench of smoke, and the once harmonious song of the forest was replaced by the clamour of axes and the groaning of trees. Treebeard's sorrow turned to anger, a rare but fearsome emotion for an Ent. "Saruman, the many-coloured," he rumbled, his deep voice reverberating through the trees. "He has betrayed the land and all who dwell upon it. This cannot be allowed to stand." The gathering of the Entmoot. In response to Saruman's actions, Treebeard called for an Entmoot, a gathering of all the Ents of Middle-earth. These meetings were rare, taking place only in times of great importance. The Ents came from the far corners of the remaining forests, their forms towering and ancient. Some moved with the swiftness of younger trees, while others, burdened by centuries of growth, took days to arrive. The Entmoot was held in a secluded glade deep within Fangorn Forest. Here, beneath the canopy of the oldest trees, the Ents deliberated. Their speech was slow and deliberate, each word carrying the weight of ages. For 3 days and nights they debated their course of action. "It is not our war," said Birchlim, a slender Ent with bark as pale as silver. "We are shepherds of the trees, not warriors." "But the forest is our charge," countered Oakroot, whose deep voice was like the groaning of ancient timbers. "If we do nothing, there will be no forest left to protect." Treebeard listened to the arguments, his expression grave. Finally, he spoke, his voice filled with both sorrow and resolve. "The time for waiting has passed. The trees cannot defend themselves, and the free peoples of Middle-earth cannot stand alone. We must act, for if we do not, all that we cherish will be lost. The March of the Ents. The Ents' decision to go to war marked a turning point in the history of Middle-earth. Led by Treebeard, they marched upon Isengard, their heavy footsteps shaking the earth. The sight of the Ents in motion was a thing of awe and terror. Towering figures of bark and leaf, they moved with a purpose that belied their ancient and deliberate nature. Merry and Pippin, the two hobbits who had stumbled into Fangorn and witnessed the Entmoot, accompanied the Ents on their march. From their vantage point atop Treebeard's shoulders, they saw the devastation wrought by Saruman. Vast swaths of Fangorn had been destroyed, the trees reduced to ash and stumps. The hobbits' hearts ached at the sight, and they understood why the Ents had chosen to fight. When the Ents arrived at Isengard, they unleashed their fury. With their immense strength, they tore down the walls and towers of Saruman's fortress, their voices rising in a thunderous chorus. For the trees, they cried. For the forests of Middle-earth. The destruction of Isengard was swift and absolute. The Ents flooded the fortress by breaking the dams of the Isen River, drowning Saruman's war machines and extinguishing the fires that had consumed so much of the forest. Saruman himself was left powerless, trapped in the Tower of Orthanc. The fate of the Entwives. Despite their victory at Isengard, the Ents' search for the Entwives continued to weigh heavily upon them. Treebeard often spoke of them, his voice tinged with both hope and resignation. They were fair and wise, the Entwives, he would say. And though we have searched for them, they remain lost to us. Perhaps they are gone, or perhaps they wait for us in lands we have yet to tread. The hobbits, moved by Treebeard's sorrow, shared stories of their own lands. There are gardens in the Shire, Pippin said, where the flowers grow wild and the trees bear fruit. Perhaps the Entwives found their way there. Treebeard smiled at the thought. Perhaps, he said, it would please me to think that they found a place where they could be at peace, but we may never know. The mystery of the Entwives remains one of the great unanswered questions of Middle-earth. Some believe they perished during the wars of old, their gardens destroyed and their voices silenced. Others hold out hope that they survived, hidden in a distant land, waiting for the day when they might be reunited with the Ents. The legacy of the Ents. The Ents' actions during the War of the Ring left an indelible mark on Middle-earth. Their destruction of Isengard weakened Saruman and gave the free peoples of Middle-earth a chance to rally against Sauron. Yet, even in victory, the Ents remained a sombre and reflective people. After the war, Treebeard and the surviving Ents returned to Fangorn Forest. They continued their search for the Entwives, their footsteps slow but unyielding. As the Fourth Age dawned and the world of men rose to prominence, the Ents faded into legend. Few now remember their names, but the forests they saved stand as a testament to their sacrifice and enduring love for the natural world. Conclusion. The tale of the Ents and Entwives is one of love, loss, and the unyielding bond between the shepherds of the trees and the world they protect. It is a story that speaks to the enduring power of hope, even in the face of sorrow, and the importance of preserving the beauty of the natural world for generations to come. Part 5. The Fall of Fangorn and the Final Recollections of Treebeard. The Fourth Age heralded a new era for Middle-earth, one where the power of the elves waned, the kingdoms of men rose, and the ancient creatures of the world retreated into memory. The Ents, once powerful guardians of the forests, began to fade into the background as the world around them changed irrevocably. Treebeard, the oldest and most revered of the Ents, watched these changes with a heavy heart. His ancient eyes, having witnessed the rise and fall of civilizations, now saw a world dominated by men and the ever-expanding cities they built. The once untouched forests of Middle-earth, his realm, were slowly being encroached upon, felled for farmland, roads, and industry. The dwindling of the Ents. The Ents, despite their incredible longevity, could not defy the tide of time and progress. The forests that had once stretched unbroken across the land were now confined to small pockets, isolated and vulnerable. The Ents had few young to take their place, for Entings were rare and took centuries to grow to maturity. Over time, many of the Ents simply passed away, their bodies melding with the forest they had cared for so long. Treebeard, feeling the burden of this reality, often sat beneath the ancient trees of Fangorn, contemplating the slow passing of his people. We were few to begin with, he mused, and now even fewer remain. We have seen many ages pass, and yet we are always the last to leave. Perhaps that is our lot. Despite his sombre tone, Treebeard never lost hope completely. He continued to care for the forest, tending to the trees as he had always done, and kept the ancient knowledge of the Ents alive in his heart. He even shared stories with the few remaining Ents, recounting the long history of their people, their battles, and their victories, ensuring that the legacy of the Ents was not entirely forgotten. The fall of Fangorn. The encroachment of men upon Fangorn was gradual but relentless. The great trees, once protected by the Ents, now found themselves threatened by logging and settlement. For centuries, Treebeard had done his best to protect the forest, but there were fewer Ents to stand watch, and their ability to deter the builders of roads and cities had diminished. There was a time when the very mention of the Ents would cause men to reconsider their destructive plans. But as the Fourth Age progressed, the memory of the Ents became nothing more than myth. Only the most ancient of men still remembered the tales of the tree giants who had once walked the earth. By the time Treebeard realized that Fangorn was in true peril, it was too late. The forest had been encroached upon, and the trees felled for the benefit of the growing kingdoms of men. Though Treebeard did not give up without a fight, he knew that the loss of his home was inevitable. In the end, the Ents retreated further into the deepest parts of Fangorn, where men rarely ventured. There they would remain, guardians of the last vestiges of an ancient world that was slowly passing away. The final days of Treebeard. Treebeard's final days were marked by a quiet acceptance of the inevitable. He had lived for so long, seen so much, and yet, in the end, there was little he could do to stop the forces of change. With the passing of time, the forests of Middle-earth were no longer as they once had been, and the great Ents, protectors of the trees, were becoming figures of legend. One evening, as Treebeard sat beneath a towering oak, he was visited by a group of travellers who had stumbled into Fangorn. They were curious about the stories of the Ents, and Treebeard, with his deep, rumbling voice, shared the last of his tales. "The forests of Middle-earth have changed," he said softly. "They are no longer as they once were, but still, there is beauty in them, and there will always be trees, though they may not walk as we did." As the sun set behind the mountains, casting long shadows across the land, Treebeard fell silent, content to watch the trees sway gently in the wind. His life had been long, and though he would never see the return of the Entwives, he took solace in the knowledge that he had done his part. The next morning, Treebeard was gone. his body had melded with the forest, as all Ents eventually do, becoming part of the very trees he had once tended. His passing went unnoticed by most of the world, but in the deep woods of Fangorn, the trees seemed to mourn his loss, their branches swaying in an unspoken farewell. The Entwives, the last hope. Though the Ents were all but gone from the world, the hope that the Entwives might still exist persisted in the hearts of a few. Some, like Treebeard, continued to believe that the Entwives had not perished, but had simply withdrawn to a distant land, away from the turmoil of Middle-earth. The elves, too, held out hope for the return of the Entwives. They remembered the days when the forests were full and the land was green. "Perhaps one day they will come back," said an old elf, looking out over the forest. "But until then, we must care for what remains." The mystery of the Entwives remained unsolved. Some believed that they had been lost to the ravages of time, while others maintained that they had simply chosen a different path, one that did not involve the endless wandering of the Ents. Their story, like the Ents themselves, became a legend, a memory of a time long past, the end of an era. As the Fourth Age progressed, the great forests of Middle-earth slowly dwindled. The elves, too, faded from the world, leaving behind only their stories and songs. Men, with their cities and technology, continued to reshape the land, and the age of the Ents became a distant memory. Yet, in the hearts of a few, the legacy of the Ents lived on. The forests, though altered by the hands of men, still held the whisper of ancient times. The trees still grew, and the air still carried the scent of the earth. And for those who remembered, the Ents were never truly gone. Conclusion: the unbroken circle. Though the Ents may no longer walk the earth, their story remains intertwined with the fate of Middle-earth. The forests, the trees, and the very land that they tended continue to tell their tale. Their legacy endures, not just in the whispered stories of the past, but in the quiet strength of nature that still thrives, however diminished. The Ents were more than just guardians of the trees. They were a reminder that even the smallest of creatures, like the seeds of a tree, can change the world in ways that last for ages, and perhaps in the deepest corners of the earth, where the roots of the oldest trees still reach toward the heart of Middle-earth, the spirit of the Ents lives on. Conclusion of the full story. This extended narrative, now spanning multiple parts, explores the profound history and eventual fading of the Ents from Middle-earth. Their story is one of timeless nature, love, loss, and legacy. It serves as a poignant reminder of the fragile balance between civilization and nature, and the enduring power of those who protect the Earth's most sacred places. And so, we come to the end of our journey through the ancient woods of Middle-earth, where the Ents walked tall, guarding the forests and nurturing the deep roots of the land. The story of the Ents, their love for the trees, their battle to protect the forests, and their eventual fading into myth, reminds us of the enduring power of nature and the quiet strength of those who care for it. As we reflect on the ancient tales of the Ents and the mysteries of the Entwives, I ask you, dear viewers, do you believe that the Entwives still exist somewhere out there, waiting for the day when the Ents will return to find them? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you've enjoyed this tale, please don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel for more epic stories and legends from Middle-earth and beyond. Your support means the world to me, and it helps me bring more of these stories to life. Now, as we close, take a deep breath and relax. Let the soothing sounds of the ocean waves carry you into a tranquil state of calm. the rhythmic ebb and flow of the waves will guide you as you unwind and let go of the day.